Many Final Fantasy final bosses were built by someone before they ever chose to be a monster. Kefka was a failed magic experiment turned into a god of ash. Ultimecia, by one reading, was written into a loop of time that left her little room to choose otherwise. Sin was armor built by a summoner, wearing a dead summoner's body. That's why today I'm breaking down the tragic origin of every major Final Fantasy final boss and what actually broke each one, starting with the soldier who was lied to about his own mother. Sephiroth. Ask players to name the boss they have faced the most across the entire Final Fantasy series, and Sephiroth would dominate the conversation. One broken soldier carrying an entire franchise on his back. He was engineered before he could talk. Hojo injected him with Genova cells while he was still in the womb, part of a Shinra experimentation program that treated an unborn child as raw material. Shinra raised him as their prize asset, the strongest soldier the company ever produced, and told him nothing true about where he came from. His father was Hojo, the scientist running the experiments. His mother was Lucretia Crescent, a woman he never got to know. Open his personnel file, and the only parent listed is Genova, a specimen jar dressed up as a birth certificate. That line sat quiet for years, while Sephiroth built a reputation as Shinra's coldest, most efficient killer. 5 years before the story starts, the Nibelheim incident cracked him open. Sent to investigate the reactor, he found Genova's true history buried in the lab files and decided he was the last surviving Cetra, rightful heir to a dead race. He burned the town to the ground and killed almost everyone in it, chasing a birthright that was never his. Thrown into the reactor's life stream afterward, he spent years down there. The planet's spiritual energy fed him power and knowledge for half a decade straight, and what climbed back out wanted to summon Meteor and fuse with the planet as a god. Some fans read the professionalism everyone praised before Nibelheim as a mask, latent cruelty, the truth simply uncovered, rather than created. Canon never confirms that reading, but the pattern fits close enough that the identity collapse looks less like creation and more like excavation. A boy told his own mother was lab equipment eventually decided humanity was for other people. One man shattered because he learned the truth about his origin. The next one shattered because someone rebuilt his mind on purpose, ran the experiment, watched it break him, and kept the broken thing as a general. Kefka Palazzo. Many final bosses in this genre threaten the end of the world. Kefka Palazzo already delivered it, then spent the following year laughing about it from a throne built on the wreckage. The Gestalian Empire needed a proof of concept. They needed to know if a human body could hold magic without dying, so they picked a soldier named Kefka and ran the experiment on him first. It worked, technically. It also tore something loose in his head that never went back into place, and the officers who served beside him afterward describe a man who was unpredictable, cruel, and impossible to reason with. The Empire got its living Magitech weapon, along with a weapon that had its own ideas about what to do next. What follows is a body count with a punchline attached. Kefka poisons the water supply of Doma, killing an entire kingdom in one motion and leaving the samurai Cayenne alive just long enough to watch his family and his king go with it. Kefka turns that grief into background noise for his next move. He hunts down the warring triad, the godlike statues holding the world's magic and balance, and rearranges them himself. The result is a cataclysm that cracks the planet apart. Continents shift, cities fall. Kefka steps out of the wreckage as a god, ruling from a tower for a full year, raining down the light of judgment on whatever settlements the apocalypse left standing. The heroes spend that entire game arriving late. A weapon the Empire built to win a war instead ended the war, the Empire and the world in a single stroke, and the thing sitting on the throne afterward answers to nobody. Ask Kefka why, and the answer is worse than any scheme. He wants you to understand that faith, love, and meaning were always jokes, and he is simply the one honest enough to laugh at the punchline while he burns them down. Plenty of fans reject the read entirely, but one detail supports it. Somewhere under the ash and the cackling might be a soldier whose mind was shattered by a procedure he may not have understood, and the game leaves that question open. The game hands you that one haunting detail and lets you decide if a broken mind still counts as a person underneath. One weapon reached godhood and held it for a year, but at least he existed in a single moment you could point to. What if the thing hunting you was already the future, reaching back through every era at once to make sure her persecutors were never born? Ultimecia. She wants to kill time itself, and the game barely bothers to tell you why she got that angry. Ultimecia lives in a future where sorceresses get hunted for existing, and CD is the organization built to do the hunting, with Ultimecia herself as its target. That's the seed of everything. A woman with power inherited across generations, born into an era that already treats her kind as a threat to be neutralized, decides the only fix is erasing the concept of eras entirely. The plan is called time compression. Collapse every timeline into one frozen moment, a singularity where past, present, and future collapse into a single point she controls forever. In effect, it is the annihilation of consequence, memory, and everyone else's free will in one move. To pull it off, she reaches backward and possesses other sorceresses, Adia most notably, using them as puppets to trigger the chain of events that lets her exist at all. The game frames sorceress power as a lineage, passed down through Hein's bloodline, through Adia, eventually into Rinoa. Ultimecia may sit at the far end of that inheritance, the version of the power that's had the longest possible time to twist. Her final form seems to reflect that corruption directly. She shifts through multiple grotesque shapes in the last fight, wings, claws, forms that look less human each time, as if the power itself is eating the woman underneath it. The strangest part is what the script leaves out entirely. The whole run of the game gives you her role, her method, her hatred, but never a single scene of the person she was before any of it. Many fans fill that gap the same way. Ultimecia is an older Rinoa, warped by centuries of loss and persecution into the thing she swore she'd never become. It's one of the most quoted theories in the Final Fantasy VIII fanbase. The game never confirms it, not once. In any script, any ending, any developer interview, nothing in canon closes that loop. Follow the pattern anyway. A beloved sorceress, a future defined by hatred of her kind, and an old woman erasing time so nobody ever gets hunted for what she was born as. She wanted to erase every era at once. The next horror runs the same erasure on a schedule, a cycle that resurrects itself every time you think you've killed it, built entirely out of the bodies of the people who tried. Sin Tidus spends the entire game trying to kill his father. He doesn't find that out until the harpoon is already in his hand. Sin looks like a mindless kaiju wrecking coastal towns on a schedule, the kind of thing you build an entire religion around fearing. Coastal cities get leveled, pilgrims die screaming in its shadow, and the whole continent treats it as weather with teeth. But the creature swimming beneath Spira's oceans has a person folded inside it, and that person is Jecht, the man who raised Tidus in Zanarkand. He has been conscious in there, surfacing when something reminds him of his past life, riding along inside the thing most of Spira prays to survive. The official story blames Machina and human sin for Sin's rampages. Convenient, because it means nobody has to look directly at Yuyavon. 10 years before the game starts, Jecht became the faith for the final Aeon meant to destroy Sin. He succeeded. Yuyavon possessed that final Aeon on the spot and rebuilt Sin around it using Jecht's body as the new core. Every summoner's pilgrimage, every calm, every funeral for a fallen guardian is a replay of the original bargain Yunalesca struck 1,000 years ago. Auron watched Jecht's turn happen. Braska died to make it happen. The Church of Yevon has spent generations selling the cure to a disease its own god manufactures on a loop. That's the machine underneath the doctrine. Sin dies, Spira gets its calm, the population celebrates in the streets, and somewhere in the wreckage, Yuyavon is already climbing into the next summoned husk to restart the countdown. The pilgrimage system costs guardian lives, and one sacrificed guardian becomes the raw material for the next sin, a resurrection cycle the priesthood blames on humanity's failure to atone. Raw material, dressed up as martyrdom. Some players will call Sin the final boss and wave off Yuyavon as a footnote you fight for 90 seconds at the end. That reading undersells the whole design. Sin is the tragedy, the body count, the father screaming at his son to finish the job because it's the only mercy left on the table. Yuyavon is the parasite wearing that tragedy as a shell, century after century, with zero interest in who's inside it. Jecht wanted to protect his son. He ended up as scaffolding for a god whose worshippers are told the whole thing is salvation. A faith that perpetuates the very monster it promises to end, generation after generation, and gets thanked for it every single time. Picture the priesthood handing out prayer beads with one hand while feeding the furnace with the other, and nobody in the pews ever sees the second hand move. Now scale that up. What if the thing keeping an entire floating world alive was the same thing engineering its destruction, and the god running the ritual felt nothing at all? Orphan. The machine keeping millions of people breathing has already scheduled their execution, and it wrote the date into its own core programming. That is Orphan. It sits at the heart of Cocoon as the fal'Cie that holds the entire floating world in the sky, the literal engine behind the lights, the crops, the air. The people of Cocoon breathe without a second thought, even as they kneel to the fal'Cie that made it. Take Orphan out and Cocoon stops floating. Everyone on it falls. Orphan knows this. Orphan is counting on it. Barthandelus spends the whole story hunting for one thing: Alatier desperate enough, angry enough, or cornered enough to become Ragnarok and strike Orphan down. That killing blow is the point. Cocoon drops, the population dies in a single mass sacrifice, and the impact is meant to tear open Etro's gate and reconnect the fal'Cie to the Maker, the distant creator they've been separated from for longer than any human alive has been breathing. Millions of lives get converted into a knock on a door. That reframes everything the game called protection. The crystal pillars, the harvest, the sky itself, all of it was upkeep on a sacrifice that hadn't happened yet. Where the last regime buried its ritual under scripture and hid its god inside a human vessel, Orphan skips the theater entirely. It shows the math on screen. 2 bodies fused into one, half angel, half machinery, because that's honestly what it is: worship and engineering with the same circuitry. Somewhere under that arithmetic is Fang and Vanille, 2 people who get handed a focus they never asked for and told. The finish line is the death of everyone they know. They refuse the assignment. The party kills Orphan anyway. Cocoon falls exactly as promised, and it's Fang and Vanilla's own sacrifice, not the Maker's ritual, that catches the world before it hits the ground. Orphan never needed hatred to want that many deaths. It just needed the paperwork to add up. A god machine could at least plead that it was built without a heart. The next one had a heart, a gift for healing, and a whole world calling him its savior, right up until the powers that chose him executed him for the sickness they told him to carry. Arden Izunia. Arden Izunia cured the plague killing his world by swallowing it, and Somnus executed him on the god's behalf for getting dirty in the process. That sentence sounds like a contradiction. It is the entire biography. Centuries before Noctis picks up a sword, Arden Lucis Caelum is the healer everyone actually wants. He pulls the Starscourge, the disease rotting Eos from the inside, directly out of infected people, and absorbs it into his own body. Villages survive because he keeps volunteering to get sicker. He is the prophesied king, the one the Astrals themselves select to rule and to heal a dying world. Then the Astrals check the paperwork on their own miracle and decide he is too stained to sit on the throne he earned by bleeding for it. Centuries of absorbed corruption, all of it taken on for other people, gets read as personal filth. He gets branded unclean. His own brother Somnus, chosen in his place, carries out the execution. The corruption he absorbed makes him immortal, so he survives the execution, cursed, and fully aware of exactly who signed off on it. 2,000 years pass. Arden spends them assembling a receipt. He takes the name Izunia, climbs to Chancellor of an empire, and spends centuries positioning the Lucian royal line and the crystal itself for a very specific collapse, one that ends with the current chosen king forced to kill him personally and detonate the whole covenant doing it. Compare that to the machine already running through this list. A boy told his mother was a specimen, a father sealed inside the monster his own son has to put down. Arden is that boy grown up, having found out exactly who filed the paperwork, spending centuries making sure they sit across from him and answer for it. Many players finish episode Arden convinced the healer was more victim than monster, sinned against as much as sinning, while the gods who scapegoated him keep their names clean in every history book Eos ever writes. The game never states outright that Arden was right. It hands him every receipt, lets him collect on all of them, and asks Noctis to kill a man whose original sin was getting sick doing what he was told. He needed centuries and an alias to force his makers to the table. Go back to the very first of these, before the lore had words for any of it, and the same bargain is already running. A knight, a dead ruler, and a tree, each one signed over to power by someone who then refused to tear the contract up. Chaos. A knight kidnaps a princess, gets thrown 2,000 years into the past by the 4 fiends he had aligned with, and becomes the monster keeping the whole loop alive. This is the actual plot of the first Final Fantasy, released in 1987, before the series had a single recurring mechanic to its name. Garland loses a duel to 4 warriors, gets hurled backward through time by the very fiends he served, and fuses with their power into an immortal being called Chaos. Then he sends those same fiends forward to be defeated by the warriors who will eventually throw him back. He is his own beginning and his own ending, a closed circuit with no exit built in. In effect, the game's whole cyclical struggle exists because one disgraced man could not accept his own death. A year later, Final Fantasy II raises the stakes past mortality itself. The Emperor of Palamecia dies mid-story, and his soul splits in two to seize control of heaven and hell simultaneously. He conquers the afterlife the same way he conquered nations, and comes back as the final boss because ambition, in his case, treats death as a jurisdictional inconvenience. Then in 1992, Final Fantasy V gives the pattern its strangest shape yet. Exdeath is a tree. A literal tree, one that spent 500 years absorbing evil spirits sealed inside it, growing patient on other people's malice until the container woke up and wanted out. When Exdeath merges two worlds to touch the void directly, he transforms into Neo Exdeath and reaches a single conclusion. Existence itself is the mistake, and erasure is the correction. A disgraced knight, an emperor. A tree that spent 5 centuries marinating in other people's sins before deciding the sin was everyone. Line up the receipts, and the pattern was already there in 1987, before the series had language for it. Every god, every empire, every scapegoated healer this video walked through was the same covenant reprinted with new names on it, a system that needed a monster badly enough to build one from whatever was standing nearby. A knight who fell from grace got a time loop. A conqueror who would not let death stop him got 2 afterlives. A tree that wanted nothing got 500 years of nothing poured into it until nothing was all it had left to offer the world. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.